Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Stitch Sessions. You can probably see I'm in a different location today, and that's because I am at my friend's beach house for a few days. And I am loving it. There's a fantastic pool outside. The weather is great. I hope you guys are having a great summer so far. So, having said that, I wanted to make sure that you all still got your weekly video, and it's a new month, so we know what that means. We need to get on to this month's gift of crochet. So for August, the gift of crochet is this fabulous beach chair caddy. And I made it in this really sweet pineapple motif using the shell, I guess we would call it the layered shell stitch effect. And you can see here that it is quite handy to have at the beach, to have on your chair. You can fit a lot of things in there. Keep things handy and keep them off the sand, because a lot of times, you know, there's nothing worse than putting your drink down and then having to worry about getting the grains of sand off of it, or having a book or some snacks or whatever your heart desires. And I actually ended up giving it to my dear friend as a gift, and she just absolutely loved it and said she's going to use it all summer long. It's, I would say it's a little bit more experienced beginner project, but it isn't anything that a true beginner couldn't do. Again, as always, you just need to have a little bit of patience and take your time, and you should have no issues at all. So without further ado, let's get our materials together and let's get stitching. Okay, in order to create your beach chair caddy, you are going to need some cotton yarn. I like cotton for projects like this because it is a little bit stronger. And because I'm going to do it in the pineapple motif, I decided to choose these colors with the tan and the yellow and the green for the embellishment, for the greenery at the top. And just in case you are wondering, I'm using the Bernat Handicrafter cotton, and these come in 50-gram balls. Some of the balls are 42.5 grams. This is actually a fabulous project for scraps because you can make this caddy as large or as small as you need, depending on what you're actually affixing it to. In my case, I'm going to affix it to a beach chair. And in case you're wondering, this color is called jute, and this color is called hot green. And I don't have the label for this one, but I happen to know that it is called, just slipped my brain. I believe it's called vanilla bean, but I could be wrong. Or vanilla bouquet, something like that. In any case, so altogether I have about 150 grams. I've used up a little bit of this yellow already, but that should be plenty for you. And of course, as always, you're going to need a pair of scissors and a darning needle. And for this project, I am using my 5mm hook, one of the ones that I use quite a bit. So in order to do this project, because I'm doing it in the pineapple type of motif, we are going to use the shell stitch design. Not like the granny shell stitch. It's more of a fan shell stitch. So in order to do this, we need to chain up. Well, first of all, I'm going to start off with this color first. We're going to start off with a slip knot. I'm getting ahead of myself here. I'm so excited. So I'm going to start with, I've got a bit of a knot there, so I'm going to start right there. I'm going to start with a slip knot, and we are going to chain a multiple of 6 for this particular stitch. So we will need multiples of 6. So you create the length that you need. I happen to know that I need 54 stitches, so that's 9 multiples of 6. And so we're just going to chain stitch until we get the multiple of 6 that we need. Once you have your multiple of 6, you're going to chain 2 more for turning. So I have 54 for my particular length that I would need. So we are going to work from the bottom up. So 54 is my width, 54 chains. So I'm going to chain 2 more. 1 and 2. And now what I'm going to do for this project is I am going to go back and do 1 single crochet into every single stitch just to fortify my foundation row. So what we will do is we will go into the second chain from the hook, so we never count the one on our hook. We'll skip that one and we'll go into the very next one, insert our hook, and we will simply do a single crochet stitch. Okay, so again, into the next one, insert your hook, yarn over and pull through. You'll have 2 loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through both loops. And that is your single crochet. Okay, so we're going to do we're going to do 1 single crochet into each chain stitch all the way across. Once you've done 1 single crochet into every single stitch, your work will look something like this. Now we are going to chain 1 and turn our work. And then what we're going to do is we are going to go into the very first stitch and we are going to do 1 single crochet. Then we are going to skip 2 stitches, 1 and 2. Into the next stitch, we are going to do 5 double crochets. So you'll yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over and pull through, yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops. You'll yarn over again and pull through the other 2 loops. So there you've created 1 double crochet. We're going to do this 4 more times into the same stitch. So you'll yarn over, insert, yarn over to pull through, yarn over, pull through the first 2, yarn over, pull through the second 2. Okay, so there's 2. Here is the third one. Fourth one. And we need to do 1 more. Into that, into that same stitch. So you see how this shell is a different looking shape than a traditional granny shell. So this one has 5 double crochets into the same stitch, so the shell really fans out a lot more. Then we will skip 2 stitches again, and into the third, we're going to do 1 single crochet. So just insert your hook, yarn over to pull through, yarn over and pull through 2. And this will anchor down each side of your shell. Okay? And that is the pattern that you are going to do all the way to the end. So we will skip the next 2 stitches into the third stitch. We now do 5 double crochets into that same stitch. And that's what creates that really pretty fanned out shell stitch. Once you have your 5 double crochets again, you will skip the next 2 stitches, and into the third one you'll do a single crochet stitch. So the single crochets tend to anchor down each side of your shell. So your work is looking something like this. It's so pretty. And so that's what we're going to do from now until the end of this row. So you will continue on. You will skip 2 stitches. Into the third, you'll do 5 double crochets, skip 2 stitches, and then you'll do a single crochet. And you're going to repeat that all the way down to the end. So go ahead and do that, and I'm going to meet you at the end of this row. So I'm coming up to the end of my row. I have 3 stitches left. So I'm going to skip the next 2 and into the last one. And remember, it's that chain 1 here. Sorry, my camera is a bit wonky, guys. It's that chain 1 that was turned, so it can get lost a little bit in there. So just flip it over and I can see that's where it is. And I'm going to insert my hook right there. And I'm going to do my single crochet stitch. And that will anchor down my shell. Okay, so your work now looks something like this. It's super cute. Okay, so we had, in this row, we had 1 single crochet flanking each end. So this pattern is a 2-row repeat. So this was row 1. And now we're going to go into row 2, and this is where I'm actually going to change colors. You could actually, if you're ever doing a blanket or a scarf, you could certainly just keep the same color. But because I want to go for the kind of that pineapple-y effect, I'm now going to change my color to the this really bright yellow here. Okay. And this will also be a great way to practice changing color. Now, some people might cut their yarn, tie off between each color change. I try not to. I'm just kind of funny that way. I like to have as much continuous yarn as possible. So for now, what I'm going to do is I am just going to pull the new yarn through, because we are now going to start this new row with a half shell. So that means we're going to have to do a couple of chains. So I'm going to pull that through so that that is the new color. But I'm going to show you something funny I do. I'm going to chain 1 with the old color, and then I'm going to chain again with the new color. And I know you're wondering, I know you're probably thinking that is super weird. But what this does is, even though I'm going to work with the new color, I want to make sure that my old color is going to be accessible so that I don't have these strands pulling up later on. Okay, and you'll see what I mean by that afterwards. So I've got a chain of 2. I'm going to chain 1 more, but again, I am going to just leave this one tucked over. See that? And usually we would kind of get it out of the way. I'm actually tucking it up and over so I can chain. So that gives me 3 chains. Okay, so it's chain of 3. That gives us the height of a double crochet. Now I'm going to turn my work, and that little tail is fine just as it is. We can weave it in later. And now I'm going to continue working with the yellow, and now I will just push this jute color kind of to the back. Okay, so we chained 3. That gives us the height of a double crochet stitch. So that's going to count as 1. And now into the base of this stitch, which is actually right there, that's where we did the single crochet stitch from the previous row. See that? We are going to do 2 more double crochets into that same stitch. So there is 1, and whoops, that's the thing with cotton yarn, is it can split a bit. There we go. And we are going to do 1 more. So this creates half of a shell. So these shells are all going to sit nestled kind of in between each other in each row. I sometimes call this the nestled shell stitch because a lot of people just call it the shell stitch, but it can easily be confused with the granny shell stitch, which it's different. So there we have our half shell. And don't worry about this kind of looking funny. When we seam it together, that's all going to get hidden. So now what we're going to do is, like we did before, we're going to skip 2 stitches. So the next 2 stitches are 1, 2, and into the third one, we're going to do our single crochet. So the pattern is exactly the same as row 1. The difference is in how we start the rows. So row 1, all the odd numbered rows always begin, they flank each side with a single crochet. Row 2 and all the even numbered rows will always begin with half a shell, and that means it's 3 double crochets in the beginning of the first stitch there, which usually means a chain 3 and 2 double crochets at the beginning, and then at the end it would be 3 full double crochets. So we've done our single crochet in the third stitch. We're now going to skip the next 2 stitches, and into the third stitch we'll do our full shell. Now notice this brings us to our single crochet stitch from the previous row. So we yarn over, insert our hook, and we are going to pull through and pull through 2 like a typical double crochet stitch. Now we need to go ahead and do this 4 more times. So we're going to have a total of 5 double crochet stitches. When you've got your 5 double crochets, you will then skip the next 2 stitches, and into the third you'll do your single crochet stitch. So you should be getting very comfortable with this pattern at this point. And we repeat that again. We skip the next 2 stitches and into the third, and there you go. That's the single crochet. We're going to do our 5 double crochets into that stitch. So once we've got our row 1 done, the following rows tend to become quite easy to do because now we kind of really don't have to count stitches if you think about it, because once we've got the shape established, you're going to see that on top of every single crochet stitch will be a shell stitch, and in the center of every shell will be a single crochet, just like that. Okay, so that was a single crochet. Now, because our shells have 5 double crochet stitches in it, our middle one is the third one, so we know that that middle one will always get a single crochet. Or you just skip 2, you just count 1, 2, and into the third one, you're going to do a single crochet. And that is it. So you can see it's starting to take shape here. So just do that all the way to the end of the round. I'm going to meet you when you're here doing the last half shell, and then we're going to talk about how we're going to come back and bring in our jute color again. And we're just coming up to our last shell here. I'm going to do my single crochet. And now I've come to my single crochet at the end of the previous row. So we're going to do a half shell here, and that is 3 double crochets. So if you're ever wondering where exactly that stitch is, just count. You're going to skip 1, 2, and into the third one, which looks like it's a chain 1, you are going to do 3 double crochets. There we go. And that will flank the side of row 2 and every even numbered row. And I love how this pattern is taking shape with the colors. So I picked this pattern, the shell pattern, because I feel like the shells remind me of the little kind of the rough scales of a pineapple. So if you turn it this way, it looks pretty cool. So the contrasting nature of these colors just kind of really brings out the shell shape. I love how that looks. So your work should look something like this. So now you've got a half shell flanking each row. So I would like to bring my jute color back. Now, some people, what they would do is bring in a different ball and just do what I did on the other side and loop it back in here. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Or you might use the other end of the ball and do that. But I am going to continue using the same one. So I'm just going to go back where I was. And I am going to now, so you can see now why I fed that up through. So it's already sitting here ready to go. So what I want to do is I will just bring it through and chain 1. And then I am going to do a single crochet into that. Actually, what I want to do, where is it? So I want to find the top of that chain 3, which is right here where we fed that through. And sometimes it can be a little finicky, so I can use the tip of my darning needle just to kind of loosen it up there. And then I will place my hook through. And what I want to do here is I want to feed it through to chain 1. And then I'm going to go back in and I'm going to single crochet just like I did at the beginning of row 1. It's a little tight there. And there we have our single crochet. Don't worry so much about this because we are going to be doing a seaming side. This stuff will all get buried, so to speak. If we were working on something more like a scarf or something like that, I would probably recommend snipping off after each row, but in this case, we're not going to have to worry about that. So don't worry if you feel it doesn't look super pretty at the moment. So we begin again, single crochet, and you know what to do. We now find our single crochet of the previous row, and we're now going to do a shell. So this is an odd numbered row, so we started with a single crochet, which we already have here. And now we're going to do our 5 double crochet shell stitch. So we're just going to insert right there. And if you're ever unsure, just count. You're going to skip 2 stitches. So we have 1, 2, and there's the third one, which is the top of our single crochet. So we will have 1, 2, and 5. Okay, so there you have it. And then we skip the next 2, 1, 2, and into the third one, we do our single crochet. And you should be getting the hang of this pattern by now. So row 3 and every odd row is the same as row 1. Row 2 and every other even row is the same as row 2. So here we go. It's going to start looking something like that. So that's basically what we do when we end off. We feed the new color at the bottom and we continue to feed up the old color up. Okay. If you find that confusing, just simply snip your yarn and start fresh each row. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I'm just a little funny that way. I like to keep my yarn on my hook as long as possible. Now, here's one thing you want to know is the length of your caddy. Now, I know that I'm going to need around 15 inches in height. And so I am going to need 15 shell rows. And how do I know that? Now, my first row is 1 inch perfectly. So you would think, okay, I'm going to need 15 rows. But because our subsequent rows are nestled a little bit deeper in, about a ½ inch down, that means we are going to need around 29 rows on top of this one. Give or take. You might get to 20 and realize that you are okay. So again, another customizable project. Now, what do we want to do? In my case, I want to be able to fit a book and my drink. So I want to make sure that I have enough length that will cover the height of my book and be able to come up and fold over to create the pocket that I want for each of them. So I know that the book I have, and an average height of a book is around 9 to 10 inches. So mine is 9 inches plus an inch to wrap around the bottom. That's 10. And then halfway up to create the pocket is 5. So that's where I got my 15 inches from. So it's as if this is the length, right? And then we are going to fold that up afterwards to create the pocket, okay? And so that in total is going to be 15 inches. Now, remember, we're working from the bottom up. So I would say start and go up to 15 rows and then measure. Oh, and the other thing is you'll probably need another 2 to 3 inches to create the flap with the buttons. So in total, we are actually looking at about 17 inches. So definitely I would go to 20 rows, depending actually on how high your chair is, how much a drape you like. Mine is quite a low chair, so I don't want too much drape. But what I'm going to do is I will meet you back here when I've got my 17 inches, and then we will chat again. So for now, you know your pattern. Row 1 and row 2, just keep repeating them. Row 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. All right, guys, so my caddy is looking something like this. Just showing you the pattern. I love how it's coming out. So as you can see, I've got a book in here just to make sure that it sits nicely. Fabulous book, by the way, by Brene Brown. And so what's going to happen here is the book is going to sit on the side pocket here, and I'm going to leave space here for my drink. Usually it's either a can or some kind of thermal container, maybe with a cold beverage, something like that. So on average, I know that a can of pop, for example, is just under 5 inches. So I'm a bit more concerned about the drink than I am the book because the book is fairly narrow, okay? The can or the cup will kind of take a little bit more girth. So I folded this in half to about just under 5 inches. Now this is going to be folded further because we're going to add the green edging to it. So I'm just going to unfold this so you can see exactly what's going on here. So I used up all of my, well, almost all of my jute, and all of my yellow is done. Now, because I didn't actually want to go and buy a whole other skein just for the back end of this, I had a lot of this blue left over from our summer sun hat. So I just continued on with the blue for a little bit and then finished with some jute and the green. So my green trim is going to represent the top of the pineapple. And you might be thinking, well, what does blue have to do with it? Absolutely nothing. I'm really trying hard to work through some of my yarn stash. So when I fold it over, this is going to be the outside. So that blue is going to get covered up. So you're really going to see kind of this pineapple-y effect with the scaling of the skin. And the greenery is going to be the top of the pineapple. In fact, that's what we're going to do next. So with this side, it was fairly easy. I just did a row of the fan shell stitches there. I'm going to do the same thing over here, and it's exactly the same thing as row 1 when we didn't have already set shells to work into. So basically we are working in the underside of our foundation chain row. So I'm just going to start you off just to remind you of how that works. And then I'm going to do a little Picot edging just to give this more of that pineapple-y look. And you'll see what I mean in a moment. So I'm going to bring back my green yarn. And I will start with a slip knot. And I'm just going to try and find the very first stitch here, and this is where I fastened in there. So I'm going to fasten on right about there. And I'm just going to slip stitch to join. And if I can get this, there we go. And then, so because we are starting already at the edge of a fan, I am going to start by chaining 3, 2, 3. We're going to do half a fan here. So you're going to yarn over and insert back into that same stitch, just like we did for row 2. So this is going to be, consider this like a row 2 pattern where we're flanking each side with half a fan. So it looks something like that. Now we're going to skip 2 stitches and single crochet into the 3rd. Now these might be a little tight, but what's super easy to find is the stitch where the fan, the base of this fan sits. So remember, this is upside down technically because we were working that way. So we are going to do a single crochet in the stitch above that. And if I count it, 1, 2, that is indeed the 3rd stitch. So I'm just going to insert my hook and do a single crochet. I'm just going to pull that through and your work will look like that. Now I'm going to skip the next 2, which is 1, 2, and into the next one, which is right there. See that? It's right above where the single crochet of the previous row, or the row above, if you're turning this upside down, sits. Into this one, we are going to do our shell or fan stitch. Some people call it a fan, some people call it a shell. We're going to do 5 double crochets. So once you know where to place your stitches, then, I mean, you're off to the races, because at this point, you should now be fairly comfortable with the pattern. So you always know you're going to do a shell or fan stitch and then a single crochet. So we've got one more here. There we go. Okay, and now we're going to, again, skip 2 stitches and single crochet into the 3rd. So 1, 2, and here is the 3rd. Oops, I did a boo-boo. See this? That's a stitch right there. It's very easy to miss. So it's 1, 2, and this is the 3rd one, which sits just above the shell stitch. So I'm just going to go into that and single crochet. And once you have done your top row, it will look something like this. So you've got each side flanked with half a shell or fan stitch. And now we're going to add this little picot edging that's just going to give it that little extra touch to make it more pineapple-like, we'll say. So you can see when I fold it down, I'm going to just leave this little lip here. Now, you can actually make it, let me just bring this up here, so that you can fold it down like this and have the pocket here, which was actually my first idea, but then I remembered that my particular beach chairs sit quite low. It's one of the ones that basically they sit low to the sand. So I realized that doing a typical, pocket where it was actually the height of the full book was not going to be a great idea for my particular chair. So that is why I'm just leaving it right about there. And then we're going to create our 2 handles and sew up our sides, of course. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's now talk about the picot edging. So you've come to the end here of your last shell, and you're going to chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. and then you can turn your work here. So what we want to do to create a picot, and usually people will chain 3. I've seen it done with chaining 4 or 5, but that's a completely different technique, which we'll talk about in another tutorial. So you've chained 3, you've turned your work, and what you want to do is go back into, let's go into this back side of your very first chain, which is right there. And what you're going to do is you're simply going to slip stitch. So you'll pull through your yarn and then continue to pull it through your final chain. So it's just going to create a little nub there, which doesn't look like much right now. Then you're going to proceed into the very next stitch, and you're going to do a single crochet. And then you're going to single crochet again. So you will single crochet across these 3 double crochets from your fan. Now you've come to the dip where you had the single crochet. We're going to slip stitch into that, and that will maintain the integrity of the dipped shape there. Okay, and then you will do 2 single crochets. 1 and 2. Now into your third stitch, which is in the middle of your fan or your shell, you are going to slip stitch 1 and then chain 1, 2, and 3. And the picot technique, again, we just go back to the very first chain. So now I'm facing the front of my work. I just go back into the first chain and I slip stitch through that, as well as the other loop on my hook. Okay, then I continue on to the next stitch and single crochet. I'm going to continue on so that you'll be able to see the effect here. Single crochet 1, single crochet 2. So this is your pattern now. And then you'll slip stitch into the single crochet, the little dip there. And then again, single crochet into the next 2, 1 and 2. Then slip stitch into the third, which is the top of your shell, and chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And then slip stitch back into the very first chain here. Oops. Careful not to split your yarn, which sometimes can happen with cotton yarn. And just be really patient with yourself. And then again, single crochet once, and oh yeah, and there's the second one, and then you'll be doing a slip stitch into the dip. So just wanted you to see that this is now what it's going to look like. So you can see it's really taking on a little bit more of that kind of pineapple-y leaf idea. So that's what we just want to do around for the edges. So you're going to continue on. You'll slip stitch in every dip, single crochet twice, slip stitch into the top of your fan, chain 3, and then slip stitch back into the first chain. Then continue, single crochet twice, slip stitch, single crochet twice, slip stitch, chain 3, slip stitch. If you need to stop the video, please do so and go back and watch how we've done these first 3. And that's what you're going to do all the way to the end of your finishing row, and you'll snip off your yarn and you'll be ready to move on to the next step, which is to sew up your sides and get our handles going. Okay, so I have all of my ends sewn in, and I am ready now to sew up my sides here. And I have to apologize. I think the last clip I was using this hook. I don't want you to think that I changed sizes. I have 2 hooks of the same size in 2 different colors here, and sometimes I just pick up whatever's here. So I will go back to my original so that nobody is confused. And we are going to talk about sewing up our side here. I really wish this camera would focus. There we go. So this is what I am deciding is my right side out. And this is what I want to do. I want to leave a longer side in the back. Okay. And now what I want to do is I want to turn it inside out, I guess, so that when we stitch, we're stitching from the outside. So that when we turn this inside out, we will have the side that we want. Okay, so what you want to do is, I'm going to use my jute color here to sew up the sides. I'm going to use the whip stitch method for this project. So I'm going to grab my darning needle and I'm going to thread my yarn through. And I am going to make sure that my length, I always like to go about 3 times the length of my project, just so that it's enough for me there. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that it's sitting exactly where I want it to be. So I don't want any of my blue to be poking through. So I just want to make sure that I've set up my end to be right where I want it. And then I'm going to insert my needle, and I'm not going to worry about the picot part. I'm going to insert right at the edge there, and I'm going to take a couple loops to make sure it's nice and strong, and then I'm going to insert anywhere along the side of these stitches, and I'm going to pull through and just secure it with a knot or 2. Okay, and then all I'm going to do is I'm just going to find at least a couple loops, pick them up on this side, and then try to pick up the corresponding loops on the other side. Okay, it's not going to be perfect because we are working into the sides of stitches, so it's just going to be a lot of eyeballing for the most part. Okay. And then again, I'm just going to try and stay fairly close to where I did my previous one. I'm going to pick up a couple loops on the other side and pull through. And this is basically the gist of it for the whip stitching portion. I'm going to actually try to work over my little tail there as I go. And because this is cotton yarn and it's meant to be fairly sturdy, I am going to kind of snuggle my stitches as I go. So I'm going to pull it so that it's snug and tight because, you know, it's going to have a book, a drink. You want it to be pretty sturdy and you don't want it to fall apart. And this is it. So you're going to do this all the way down till you hit the bottom. If you have a lot of yarn left over, like sometimes I do this and I still have quite a bit of yarn left over, I'll whip stitch it back up just to reinforce it. So totally up to you. So you can see it's already kind of closing up there. Okay, so go ahead and do that, and then we're going to talk about how to gauge the portion where you're going to put your book in there. Okay, so I'll meet you back here in a few minutes. Okay, everyone, so just an important note is make sure that you sew both ends first before you tackle the center seam. I'm giggling because I did something completely silly because I just wasn't paying attention. So after I did the first seam, I started to do this center seam. And then of course I had turned it inside out when I did it. and didn't work out so well. So make sure you do the outside seams first, inside out, and then turn it right side out to do your middle seam. So that's just what I'm doing here. And I'm making sure that it's lining up nicely the way I like it. So I just wanted to make sure that the little green puffs out. And notice I didn't do the picots in the back, and that's because we're going to do the strap, so there's no point in doing a picot, and we're going to do it in the green so that all matches. But in any case, so I've got my marker here, and I am just going to seam it right in here. Now, if you wanted to do the seam all the way down, what you want to pay attention to is the fact that you're going to want to change yarn colors. Actually, the yellow wouldn't be so bad because then you could just go straight down the center here, just so that it blends in a little bit more. That is up to you. I'm just going to take a little wee bit of yarn here, and actually I'm just going to feed it right through where I've got my needle already, and then I'm going to pull it through, and then I'm just going to feed it in and out right through the back. And I'm not so worried about the back. Again, this part's going to be sitting against the arm of the chair. No one's really going to see it. So I'm not going to be too picky about it. And I'm just going to feel my way around and back through. And then maybe I'm going to go down into this loop here. I just want to do it 2 or 3 times just so that I can really make sure that it's fairly secure. It's more just to create the divider between the book and the beverage container, or whatever else you want to use this for. And I mean, no one says it has to be for a book. It could be used for sunglasses, anything. Sun lotion, all kinds of cool things. So yeah, your phone, holy cow, all kinds of ideas. Okay, so I'm going to just feed that one more time through the back. And in fact, I'm going to feed this one through the back, and then I'm going to knot it, and we're good to go. Then we are moving on to the straps. So I'm just feeding that through. And so now you can really see and test it out. There we go. And you can barely tell that it is there. Okay, then we'll tie that, and we are on to do the straps. Okay, so I know that my chair sits approximately 7 to 7.5 inches from the ground because it's one of those low beach chairs. So the height of my caddy is already 6 inches. So I want to take that into effect because I don't want to make my strap too long so that it's actually going to drag in the sand, right? But I also want to make sure I have enough length that it's going to wrap around the arm of the chair. So 7 inches from the ground, and then usually you're going to have maybe another 4, maybe 5 inches for your armrest. So I'm going to go with a height of 4 inches to be able to hang. So that means my strap, I'm going to make it about 8 inches so that it can fold over. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make 2 armhole adjustments so that if you need to make it a little bit shorter, you can. So let's get started on the strap. And we want to do it with the same color as the top of our little pineapple here so that it blends in. So we're going to bring back our green yarn, also known as hot green. Whoops, where are we here? There we go. And so what I want to do is I want to make 3 straps actually. I want one close to each end and then one probably close to where I have the seam. That way each section feels supported. So this is another reason why these fan stitches come in handy. So I have one on each end, and they're not perfectly at the end, but I'm going to go 1 fan inward. So I'm going to choose a fan here and the fan here for my outside straps. Okay, and then what I'll do is, actually this works out perfectly because I have 5 shells in the center, and I'll just put one more strap in the center. So this worked out perfectly. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab our hook again. I've got my 5mm. And we're going to create a slip knot. And so we're going to take our work, and this is all right side out. Yeah, everything is all where it needs to be. I'm going to skip this fan stitch here, and I'm going to go into this next one. So remember, we have 5 stitches here. We're going to use all 5 stitches. So we're just going to insert our hook into the very first stitch of the fan here. My camera would just focus. That's great. I'm going to insert our hook, and we are going to slip stitch to join. Just like that. And if you can, we're going to work over that tail. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to use single crochets just to make this a little sturdier. So we're going to chain 1, and then back into the same stitch, we're going to do 1 single crochet. So you'll insert your hook and pull through, and pull through just like that. Okay, and then we're going to do a single crochet into the next stitch. And we're going to do that all the way across until we have 5 single crochets. So that's 3, that's 4, and here is 5. Okay, so now we've got something that looks a little bit like that. And now we're going to chain 1 and turn our work. And I'm going to try to continue to work this short tail over. So I'm going to bring it up again. And this is simply what you're going to do until, so we're going to chain 1. We're going to go back into that same stitch. So a lot of times we would have skipped that. But because it's a single crochet, I find that it works better if you do go back into that same stitch. Just fortifies it. And then we continue across, but you want to make sure that you always have 5 stitches across so it stays nice and even. So this is 2. This is 3. This is 4. And this is 5. Okay. There you go. You can see that the strap's starting to form. Then we chain 1 and turn our work. So this is what you're going to keep doing. So I'm just going to go back into that first stitch there. Oops, I lost my tail. I'm going to try to bring that tail back up. So this is what you're going to do all the way until you hit 8 inches. Sorry, you're going to do this all the way until you hit a total of 6 inches. So I know we discussed creating a strap that's 8 inches because when we fold it in half, it's going to be around 4. But really, you have to take into consideration the fact that the arm rest may be a bit thicker. So we're going to go up to 6 inches, and then we're going to create an arm, then we're going to create a little buttonhole. Then we're going to continue on for another few more inches. And so this will give us some give if we need to snip in the handle shorter or longer. So we're going to have 2 buttonholes so you can adjust the length. So that's why I'm saying go until you hit about 6 inches. And then I'll meet you back there and we'll discuss how to make the buttonhole. Once you've done your 6 inches in length, you're going to have something that looks like this. And so essentially we want something that folds over like that. So I actually went a bit further. I did 7 inches actually, because of the fact that I want to take into consideration the width of the arm. It's not too wide. It's probably about 1.5 or so. So I'm going to do my first buttonhole at 7 inches. And so what we're going to do is we're going to chain 1 as we've done. Then into the first stitch, we'll do a single crochet. And now we're going to chain 3. And then we're going to find the 5th stitch, and we're just going to insert and single crochet into there. Oops, sometimes cotton yarn can be very splitty. I want to try and get another loop in here. If I can, there we go. And single crochet. So there you can see you've got your buttonhole there. Depending on how big your button is, you just want to make sure that at least it'll hook in there. So that's our buttonhole there. Then you'll chain 1, turn your work, you'll single crochet into that first stitch, and then the next 3 single crochets you can either stitch into the space or into the stitch. I'm just going to do it into the space just because it's a little bit easier. So I have 2, I have 3, and then I'm going to single crochet back into the end stitch here. Just making sure to catch 2 loops. And there you have it. So that's your buttonhole. And then I would continue to do another 2, maybe 3 more rows and do another buttonhole. And this way you can adjust the height of your strap depending on the chair that you're using. So that would be shorter, and then the next one down would just create a little bit more length there. And again, if you've got your chair already handy, the best thing to do is just measure it as you go. So that's it. So you're going to do 3 more rows, do another buttonhole, and then I would finish it off with 2 more rows to finish off there. Okay, and so what we're going to do is we're going to do 1 on each side. So on this side, I'm going to do the same thing, not the first fan, but the second one in. Now, I am worried that I'm probably running out of green yarn, and I really don't want to have to go buy a whole new ball just for 1 more strap. So definitely 1 on each side for me will do. It's pretty sturdy. If you've got some left, I would maybe do another one in the center here just to give it a little extra bit of structure. Okay, so go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you at the end and we'll see how many straps I end up doing. And voila, here it is, guys, your pineapple beach chair caddy. So you can see it fit nicely on my beach chair, and it sits just over the armrest, and I've got a few snacks in there as well as my drink, and I am enjoying a fabulous day on the beach. So I hope you enjoyed making this project. I had a lot of fun with the design and the different colors, and I'd love to see how yours turned out. Make sure that you tag me on Instagram at The Stitch Sessions, and I'd love to see how yours turned out. And as always, if you have any questions, you can drop me a comment in the comment box down below, or you can always email me directly at info@crochetcrafty.com. And don't forget to click that subscribe button so you'll never miss every time we upload a new tutorial or stitch session conversation. That's every Wednesday. In the meantime, everyone, happy summer, happy crocheting, and take care.